So I have a couple of questions here. And one of them says, please elaborate on the need for a clear lexicon. He's referring to a language that's used today that would not add fuel to the fire of terrorism, lack of religious freedom, etc. The person clarified, instead of using words like Islamist or jihadist, are there other words that we can use, such as militants or criminal acts of violence?
You know, I mean, this is one of the great, there's a scholar in Morocco that wrote a book called The Crises of Terminology, which is endemic everywhere. And then the fact that we don't define our terms anymore. Traditionally in the scholastic tradition, both in the Islamic and Christian world, you had to be able to define any term you used to make sure the interlocutor knew exactly what you were saying. So if we say religious freedom, define your term. And so I think just defining terms is just really important. But for instance, the word in Arabic that they use for fundamentalists is usuliyun, which is one of the highest words in the Islamic tradition, and they've reduced it to, they took fundamentalism and they used it. So the usuli scholar is the constitutional theorist in Islamic tradition. So now the word usuli means extremist. And this is a problem. We see this again and again. Jihad is a very high term for Muslims. It's not a negative term, but it's been completely put in a negative light. In the same way that crusade is a very positive term on our side of the pond, and yet in the Arab world, if you translate crusade, because we don't see the cross in crusade anymore. If you go into a dictionary and see the etymology, you'll see cross. We don't see that. But in Arabic, it's harb salibiyya, which is a war of the cross. And so when Bush said this is a crusade, when it was translated into Arabic, it said هذه حرب صليبية. And so he's using a relatively neutral term in our culture, but when it was translated into Arabic, it became a religious term of war. He's declaring religious war on the Muslims. And these are real problems that we have in interpretation, translation. I mean, so much is lost in translation. I told one of the State Department people, we were talking about tribes in the Arabian Peninsula. He didn't even know that Bani Tamim, which rules Qatar, is a traditional rival tribe of Rabi'a, which rules Saudi Arabia. Like, they've had a 2,000-year rivalry. I mean, there's poetry about this rivalry, And so even though they work together, they're part of the Gulf things. They're Mudari, and these are, of another ilk from Rabi'a. So, and these are still important in those parts of the world.
So is religious freedom a strategy of the Emir of Qatar to,
undermine? Well, there's definitely digs. It's
digs,
definitely
like, see,
digs,
we're doing better than you are.